brain it here. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to outline a little scenario I pieced together using bits of various scientific disciplines and the wonderful rubber cement of logic. As you've probably guessed, this is a scenario of beginning of life and evolution without the help of any magical, floaty, imaginary friend. I'm going to start with something very basic, DNA. We all know what DNA is, the basic instructions, the blueprint for life as we know it. So, what is DNA made of? Everyone yell out the answer. Huh? Amino acids. It's a long chain of amino acids. Now, amino acids are little strings of molecules. So we got strings of molecules. That's what DNA is. All molecules are a bunch of atoms put together. So, are we seeing how DNA comes out of basic building blocks such as molecules? Yes, I assume we are. Now that we've got DNA, or DNA made out of basic molecules, let's start our little story. Let's start it on Earth, before life, obviously. Earth, when Earth has already been formed, but life has not yet, obviously, inhabited it. Now, on Earth, which is at this point, a large ball of rock and water and goo, we have molecules. Lots of molecules everywhere. Molecules make up everything, obviously. They're everywhere. So, we have molecules. We have lots and lots of molecules. Now, what do molecules do? By the laws of physics, they just group and ungroup and cluster and uncluster. That's what they do. Magnetic bonds, electrons, positive, negative. Take a basic physics lesson. I'm not going to explain that. So, we have molecules bonding, unbonding, forming, unforming. Eventually, we're inevitably going to get clusters of molecules. Through processes of random formation and unformation of molecules, we're going to get certain formations of molecules that happen to be what we recognize as amino acids. Sort of pre-amino acids, if you will. Nothing godly involved in that. I hope we're all on the same page with the amino acids coming out of the molecules. So, if we agree this is plausible, let's just take it from there. We have these amino acids. The amino acids are, like the rest of the molecules, going to form and unform. Inevitably, over millions of years, we are going to get just the right sequence of amino acids to create DNA! Basic DNA. Probably a lot less complicated than what we now know as DNA. And this DNA forms creatures, little creatures. Doesn't just join up and form them, but inevitably through forming and unforming, this DNA is going to form and unform and gather more molecules, give off other molecules, gather more molecules, and become organisms. Very basic organisms. I'm not saying, like, out of the goop rises a crustacean. No. These are going to be tiny, tiny, microscopic, one-celled, even though they wouldn't be what we normally recognize as cells, organisms. Think bacteria or virus, except even less complicated. Life. Life without God. Now, let me pause here in my story and say, if anyone has any problems with what I've said so far, comment or make a video, whatever. Tell me. Inform me. I am obviously unaware, seeing as I have played this whole scenario out and wouldn't just feed you logical fallacies. So, if I'm wrong, if I'm missing a basic concept or something here, if there's something fundamentally wrong with my story so far, please inform me. But let's assume for now that there's nothing wrong with it. It's a good hypothetical situation, it's possible, it's plausible. Okay, so we move on. We have this little organism thing. This organism divides. We have two little organisms. We have these two fundamentally basic organisms. They divide. we now have multiple organisms. Now, again, over millions of years, these organisms develop. And this is the evolution bit, ready? These organisms are made up of DNA and proteins, amino acids, all more clusters of molecules which have formed and joined, as we're assuming. We have these organisms based on DNA, and DNA is flawed. DNA is just a bunch of molecules. Obviously, there is room for error. There's room for error in everything, just about. Inevitably, there will be an error in maybe just one tiny bit of the DNA. So we now have a genetic mutation. Now let's say this genetic mutation causes one of these little organisms to be slightly bigger than the rest of the organisms. Now, maybe this causes this organism to be able to absorb more food, take in more particles it can use for energy. This organism's chances of survival are going to go up. It's not going to run out of energy as easily as the others would. It's going to survive longer, therefore going to reproduce more than the others. So we now have a small cluster of slightly larger organisms among the other organisms. Two different species. You get it? We understanding it so far? Now, in each of these species, other mutations happen. And so we get branches and branches of more and more different tiny differences. And let's say after 1,000,000 years, maybe the small organisms have died out. They haven't been able to take in enough energy. And the larger organisms have survived. Amongst these, there will be other mutations. Now let's say one of these organisms develops a vesicle, and it can absorb other little organisms and decompose them, use them for food. We now have carnivores! Survival of the fittest. The non-carnivorous ones, who survive on maybe just water, I don't know, carbon, oxygen, whatever they break down and use for energy. And we have the other ones who are gnawing away at those little ones and using them for energy. So, we have these two combating ones, and let's say one of the non-carnivorous ones has a genetic mutation that causes bits and pieces of it to be undigestible by the bigger one. I suppose it wouldn't be bigger, but by the carnivorous one. This one would survive better than the other non-carnivorous ones because it wouldn't be able to be eaten. So, we have the carnivorous ones, the non-carnivorous ones, and this one of the non-carnivorous ones that can't be eaten. So obviously, he's going to survive better than the rest of the non-carnivorous ones. Therefore, reproduces more, and we get a whole little section of the non-carnivorous ones that can't be eaten. Now, this won't do for the carnivorous ones because they need food. So, after genetic mutation, randomly, one day, a genetic mutation occurs that allows this carnivorous one to consume that unconsumable particle in the other non-carnivorous one. And it can now eat them. And here we see evolution at its best. Eventually, these will mutate genetically, like I said, over millions and billions of years. Mutations will build up, and we will get animals, and plants, and humans. So guys, this is my lovely little tale of creation. Like I said, if anyone has any problems with it, obviously it's just a little story, a hypothetical situation. You know, I'm not saying this is how it happened, but I'm also not saying this isn't how it happened. Who knows? We weren't there. Just saying it's a plausible suggestion. Comment, rate, subscribe, video respond, whatever the verb of that is, with any problems, or maybe you approve of my creation scenario. I don't know. So just keep doing what you're doing, guys.